This is the Podcast Engineering Show, episode 6. Here's my in-house band. Hit it. It's almost like I have a talk show, like late night talk show. I have my own band. Well, this isn't really my own band. This is a demo I produced in the 90s, though. So welcome, everybody, to the Podcast Engineering Show. This is going to be a great episode. Every week, we bring you podcast production techniques and stories and tips, and we get down and dirty. We talk shop with podcast producers, engineers, and other specialists and experts. I think, Rob, you're all 4 of those. So, bonus today, I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and since I entered podcasting about 4 years ago, I've noticed a huge lack of audio skills in podcasting in general. And that's where this show can help. So if you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcast will sound a lot better and you'll spend less time producing them. And of course, Barry's with me. You guys know Barry, the maintenance guy in my old building. Good morning, Barry. How you doing? You ready to go?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. He's ready to go. I got to get more. I have more Barry clips on another page, but I gotta get him. Right, Barry? I got to get more clips of you, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So this show is brought to you by the Podcast Engineering School. This is a school that I just started. It's going to take a while to get going, but if you want to learn how to podcast, or if you want to learn more about audio engineering and podcasting, or if you want to start a career as a podcast producer or engineer, that's what I'm going to start teaching people with the school. And of course, my other company, Fractal Recording, providing podcast production of the highest quality to companies, authors, and podcast networks. And that's the big announcement today. I can finally open my mouth. And it's so funny, Rob, that I'll introduce Rob formally, but Rob's on the show today because he's our media hosting partner for the Forbes Podcast Network. That's
Very
right.
Cool.
10 shows launched a few days ago. If you haven't heard any of these shows, go to Forbes.com or go to iTunes and search Forbes. It's just awesome. I've been working for a couple months with them, producing these shows. I think each of the 10 shows has a few episodes that are, they're at least launched with one episode. Some have launched with more, but it's just really cool shows. I got to tell you, just check them out. There's all different hosts, different flavors, different topics of conversation, different production qualities. It's just pretty cool. So Rob, let me introduce you. Rob Walch, the Vice President of Podcaster Relations for Libsyn. Libsyn, we've all heard of Libsyn. It's the biggest media hosting company in the podcasting space. Rob started podcasting in 2004. You must have been right on the heels of the Podfather. That seems like a long time ago now, but it's 12 years. It's not that long, but does it seem like that long ago to you, Rob?
It's been a while, but it's been a fun, fast 12 years, 11 years. I started late 2004.
Got it.
I started listening. That was listening to Adam Curry early on in the early days. So I owe a lot to him and Doug Kay, Paul Kothmeyer. Those are people that I learned from on the audio engineering side.
Nice. So you're also the co-author of the book, Tricks of the Podcasting Masters, which is cool. And you've consulted regarding podcasting with many big-name individuals and companies and including the Forbes Podcast Network as well. And you're in Kansas City. And I got to ask you about Kansas City. Sometimes I look at, when I was looking to move from New Jersey to somewhere else, I just pulled up a map of like the earthquake fault lines. And of course, on the West Coast, there's all fault lines. East Coast, there's almost nothing. But right on Kansas City, it's like a bullseye. It's this big thing where Kansas City gets earthquakes. Do you ever feel earthquakes?
We don't get them. I think you need to look. I think that's St. Louis. St. Louis has got the New Madrid fault. So Kansas City, though, we've never had any earthquakes here.
No,
I've never since I've been here.
I'm going to look it up. I swear it's Kansas City, and it's like literally a bullseye. It's like, how the maps, they have the color for the severity, like yellow is okay, orange is more, red is more, and
the most powerful earthquake in United States history was on the New Madrid fault, like in the early 1800s, and that was down in St. Louis.
That's crazy. Well, let's get going here. You guys know the drill. We like to start with a speed round because for reasons I've explained already. So let's get into this, Rob. We want to learn about the shows that you host and produce. And first is, tell me about the shows that you host and produce. I know you host and produce a few of them.
Okay. My first one is Podcast 411, and that was the one I started in 2004, and that was a podcast about interviewing other podcasters, so kind of like Inside the Actor Studio, but for podcasting.
Nice.
And that was really where I got my start, cut my teeth, and learned how to do the audio, because the first 30 episodes was not good. But that's the one that's my first and foremost show, but it's kind of on a hiatus. And then I have another show that I co-host with Elsie Escobar. It's called The Feed, and that's the official podcast for Libsyn. And those two shows I record the same way, which is we're doing via Skype or other VoIP, and we're recording. I do recording on my side now. Elsie actually is the producer on the feed, but I still do the recording the same as I did on Podcast 411.
Got it.
And then I've got Today in iOS, which is my bigger show.
Okay.
That's my show I've been doing since before the iPhone launched. So I started in April, so 9 years ago, right? April 2007. So that one started 9 years ago, right before the iPhone launched. And that I do weekly. And then I've got another show called KC Startup 411, which I go out and remotely do recording. So that has a different setup. So I should say the Today in iOS one is done just me into the computer. So it's a completely different setup than Podcast 411. So I actually have 3 different show or type of show formats that I do for recording. One is out on the field recording. One is just solo into the computer. And then the other is Skype. And I have a different setup for each one.
Right. Okay. That's awesome. And where can people find these shows? Is there like one website or
Podcast411.com is where you can find Podcast 411. TodayInIOS.com for Today in iOS, KCStartup411.com for that one, and thefeed.libsyn.com for the feed. So thefeed.libsyn, LIBSYN.com.
And I'll have all these links in the show notes, guys, so you could just go to the show notes and check it out. So let's get into the workflow of each one of these. So Podcast 411 and the feed, you just do it over Skype. So tell me about like when you're getting ready to do one of those episodes all the way until you're pretty much ready to upload it, and publish it.
All right. First off, they can see my setup. If you want to, go to podcast411.com/mixer.pdf.
Nice.
And you can see my setup. This is the setup I've used for I guess over now it's 11 years. So that's the setup I've been using for 11 years. And it is with a condenser mic that is plugged into an M-Audio mobile USB preamp. The USB comes back to the computer, and then I take the analog out of a 1/4 inch, run that into a mixer. I take the Skype audio out of the computer, run that into the second channel in the mixer, and then I take the audio out of the mixer and I run it into the Marantz PMD 660 and record in the Marantz. And the reason I do that setup, and there's other ways I know you can do Skype, but I like to record Skype off the computer because then there's no CPU usage, no overhead that is competing with Skype. That allows Skype to be the only thing running on the computer. It gets you the best sound possible out of Skype. Additionally, since I'm recording on the Marantz PMD 660, it's bulletproof. It's not going to crash. It's not going to fail. You're recording there on a nice flash, SD card, and it's rock solid. And I like the Marantz too because you have to hit the record button to see the levels moving and to hear it. So you can't hear anything out of the Marantz unless you actually hit record.
Wow.
So it's bulletproof in that way that you can't forget to hit record if you monitor out of the Marantz or if you at least look at the monitor levels. So that's one of the things I love about Marantz. We joked beforehand about losing interviews. That's one of the beauties about the Marantz. Now it's an expensive piece of equipment, but it's worth it, and it's lasted me well over 11 years, so it's been worth the money.
Right, and that's just a portable digital recorder, just stereo input, stereo in.
Right, and the other thing about the Marantz is if you want to go out and do really professional So if you want to go out and do professional audio recording, you want to go and look good, the Marantz is the recorder you want. And you want to get it from OADE Brothers because you can get the lower preamps in there. And I'm sure they've got a newer version of the 660. I haven't really looked into it.
Right.
Haven't needed to. But the beauty is you can have phantom power and XLR. So you can take two Shure SM58 mics, plug them into it, go out into a noisy environment, into a bar. I recorded an interview with Tiki Bar, Jeff from Tiki Bar TV, in a Tiki Bar on a Saturday night. It was a Saturday night in a Tiki Bar, and we recorded an interview because we both had Shure SM58s. It didn't pick up the background noise. So that's the beauty of the Marantz. That's my high-end mobile recording environment.
Got it. And so it was podcast411.com/mixer.
Mixer.pdf.
Oh, PDF. Okay, cool.
Right. And that's the recording I do with the feed as well. And I use that same recording for the feed, and it just makes for a nice backup.
Right. Oh, yeah, this is a really nice PDF. I'll have the link to this in the show notes as well. The M Audio, right? I have an M Audio for my MacBook Pro, which I got in probably 2009. So I have an M Audio audio interface for that as well. So today in iOS, tell me about the workflow for that one.
Today in iOS is a lot easier. Today in iOS, I plug in my Yeti mic to my USB port in my MacBook. I open up GarageBand and have multi-track in GarageBand. I have my intro already pre-done there, and then I just record. And I just record and edit as I go along. I use Evernote for my notes. I script the whole thing. So I create my notes ahead of time. I get a folder where I put in listener feedback and voicemail messages that come in, and then I'll pull them into the different tracks as needed. But today in iOS is really just all done in GarageBand, Yeti mic connected via USB. The Yeti is what I'm talking on right now to you. And I like the sound of the Yeti. And I put the cardioid pattern, so it's just from the front of the mic, which is what I like about the Yeti, and doesn't pick up much background noise. And then I use Sound Soap to remove any other background noise, so I get rid of any of the air conditioning noise or things like that may kick in.
Sound Soap?
Sound Soap. Best, if you're on a Mac, Sound Soap is the best $150 you're ever going to spend, because it's a plugin that works in GarageBand. So it works in each track of GarageBand. You can learn the background noise. This is great for like when people call into my show. I have a show today in iOS. It's about the iOS. Where do you think people call in from? Their phone, in their car, going down the highway.
Right.
So this allows me to pick up the background noise and filter it out. So Sound Soap gives you some really nice background noise cleanup filtering capabilities, and you can put it on each track, so you can learn the noise for each individual track. So I have one that's just set for my background ambient noise for my office, and I don't even adjust it anymore. I just copy my last episode, I make a save as, and then it comes over to the next one. So it's just a nice, easy setup.
And why do you, on this PDF that you shared with us, it says that you use one of three different mics or another mic. Why do you use different microphones?
I like the Apex 415. That was what I originally used. The problem with the Apex 415 was the shock mount I had crumbled.
Oh.
And I haven't found a good shock mount for it to replace it. So now I'm just using the MXL 990. I mentioned the MXL 990 in there originally just because it's a cheap condenser mic. You can buy them for $60. And if you filter out the background noise, it's fine. And then again, you could use a Yeti Pro or any other. And I was just giving examples in there of different ones.
Sure.
I'm a firm belief that if you spend over $150 on your microphone, you spent too much money. At the end of the day, you're encoding this down to 64 kilobits per second, mono, people listening through earbuds. The idea is to get a good, quiet background, and then if you have any decent condenser mic, you're going to sound good.
Nice. I'm just looking at your PDF here because I want to look at this other hardware you have.
The mixer in there, I've got an Alesis Multimix 8 mixer. I don't use the actual it's a USB mixer, but I don't use the USB on it. People might ask why I the setup I do it the way I do it. The other nice thing about this setup is if you want, you can use this setup for your solo recording right into the computer. So you can skip the mixer and the Marantz, and just use the M audio and go right into the computer to record your intros and your outros. And that was why this setup was how I originally used it. Was I would also do my intros and outros. Ultimately, I switched over to the Yeti for my intro and outro for my Today in iOS and the whole show. Just because I'm doing less of the Skype recording, I didn't want to keep that equipment set up on my desk all the time.
Got it. So do you record your episodes like front to back, like one shot, or do you actually, record different things, edit them together? Like, what's your workflow in that sense?
For Podcast 411, the way I would do that, I would do the interview. It was an interview show. So I would do the interviews ahead of time and get the interviews in the can, that part of it. And then I would come back and then edit. I use GarageBand for editing. I would do my editing. I take the recording over, bring it into GarageBand. I would edit it, clean up the recording part, then slide it down, and then I would do my intro. I'd do my outro, and then I would use, again, the same microphone, because I'd want to use the same microphone for the intro and the outro, so I sounded similar to how I sounded in the recording.
Okay. And so what is your background in, did you have any background in audio before you started podcasting?
No, when I wanted to get into podcasting, and so to take you back to October 2014, I read an article, 2004.
Right.
October 2004, I read an article in Engadget that said, hey, if you want a podcast, just add this enclosure tag to your RSS feed and you're good to go. And I'm like, what's an RSS feed? What's an enclosure tag?
Right.
So I had to learn that part, but also to do the recording, I was like, okay, I've got a Mac. I got GarageBand. I opened it up, and I'm like, So I went out and I bought David Pogue's book, GarageBand, The Missing Manual, and I read that over one weekend, figured out how to use GarageBand to record audio. So that was my background. And then the first interview I did, recording somebody, it was horrible. I was trying to figure out how to do this, and I had a speakerphone in front of a mic, in front of a digital recorder, and I'm talking and the person's talking, and that's how I tried to record it. And then, I learned different ways, and I talked to different people. Again, Paul K, who was from the PK&J show, he was an early listener, and he gave me advice, and then figured out, that going with the M audio, going with the mixer, going with the digital recorder was the better way to record Skype. I tried a lot of different methods in the early days, so I did a lot of experimenting, and it became quick and obvious to me that the best way to record Skype is not on the computer. It was to get it off the computer.
Right.
And that was a more reliable way of doing it. I have ways to record on the computer if I need to, Skype, but I prefer not to. I prefer this setup. To me, this will give you the best sound for a Skype recording you can get. How the person sounds to you when you listen to them is exactly how it gets recorded. And that's the beauty of that setup.
Right.
You're not losing anything.
So what do you do about Skype when you have a Skype connection and it gets a little glitchy sometimes? Some things get stretched and stuff. Do you go back in and have to edit all that?
Yeah, one of the things I try to make sure is that I start, how to make Skype work better. Again, there's certain tricks you can use. One, nothing else is running on the computer, only Skype.
Right.
Two, the person that initiates the Skype call has the best internet connection. I've got a great internet connection. I live in Kansas City. Kansas City has the best internet in the United States because that's where Google Fiber came in. And it's amazing, when Google Fiber came in, Time Warner Cable upped their internet speed here, and Sure West upped their internet speed. So this is the one place where you can go, and everybody has over 100 megabit internet connection here.
Wow.
It's
probably really 100 too.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so everybody has 100 meg at minimum or at 1 gig. So if you have the best internet connection, you initiate the call, you have nothing else running on your computer, and you tell the person you're talking to, don't run anything else on the computer, chances are you're going to get a really good Skype connection. And I rarely have issues with Skype calls. Sometimes, but very, very rare.
Okay. Yeah, it can be tricky, and that's why, actually, I should mention, I just started using this platform called Cast, which you and I are connected on right now. Mm-hmm. And I actually saw on Facebook the past few days, I think there was an article in some magazine about it. I think it's about to blow up because it's one of these platforms where it connects you just like Skype with a nice, VoIP connection. However, right now, as I'm talking to you, Rob, it's your computer on your side is recording a clean copy, a local copy in MP3 format, which is not optimum, but okay, but it's clean. And then it stores an MP3 on your machine and slowly uploads it as we're talking. So basically, if there is any glitching or any dropouts, at the end of the day, I just download your local copy and it's totally clean. There's
There's applications like Ringer does the same thing on iOS. So you can do it where you have two people on iOS devices. It records it locally on the device and then uploads that recording as well.
Did Ringer go to actual computer? Because I know they were just on mobile devices for a long time.
Yeah, they're not. I'm just saying there's other ones that do that same basic idea, which is record locally, upload, combine. Ringer does that. Voice, another app called Voice does that. So yeah, there's a few of them out there that are doing that. Record it. Basically, it's a double ender. It's a double ender where your end user doesn't have to remember to hit record.
Right. There's another one called Zencaster. It does the same, very similar. Yep. Which I tried that, and there was some weird noises, and that's the thing about a lot of these services that use Chrome as their I don't know what base. They connect through Chrome. They use Chrome to connect, and sometimes Chrome can add that ducking thing where like Skype does. Like if two people talk at the same time, it's going to duck someone's voice down to stop the feedback, especially if people are listening on speakers, which is an atrocity. But anyway,
but yeah. I mean that's one of the things you always tell people is when you do any of these VoIP recordings is headphones, folks. Headphones, please.
Right? It's so funny. By the way, have you noticed this? A lot of people I've been connecting with lately, I'll connect with them either with Cast or Skype or whatever, and I'll say, "Oh, are you using a headset with a microphone?" And they say yes. And then in talking to them, they're wearing earbuds, like earbuds with the little microphone on the wire. And I don't like. To me, there's a clear difference between a headset with a mic and earbuds. But people are just like, yeah, I have a headset with a mic, and I don't know. That seems weird to me. But
Apple's mic actually does a halfway decent job. It does not so bad. I mean,
I agree with that. I agree, but the problem with that is the Apple earbuds. If someone has it, it's like the wires laying on their shirt and they're moving around. Right. You get that little rubbing thing,
issue. Right? Yeah.
And then when I ask people can you just hold it away from your shirt a little? And I tell them, look, you don't have to hold it up to your mouth. Just hold it away from your shirt so it doesn't rub. What happens is either one, they forget and it starts rubbing again, or number two, they start putting it right up to their mouth and they start blowing out the the level. Oh, it's so much fun.
And by the way, I think we did the feed. I mentioned the feed at Libsyn.com. I think episodes 64 of the feed we recorded using Zencaster. It was it was 64, episode 64 of the feed, if you want to hear Zencaster, how the audio quality on that sounds.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, and I actually, to finish my story, I recorded using Zencaster, and there was that little ducking thing, and there was another little level thing, so it was a little weird. And then I tried this Cast, and it seemed cleaner. And I actually talked to the guy who developed each one. I kind of got them on the phone because I want to talk to these people. I want to find out what is it? How does it work? Like, I'm not a typical podcaster. I'm an audio engineer. I want to know the details. I want to know if when it's recording locally, if it's using that, recording that duct signal, or if the signal is split off, one is recorded clean and the other one goes through the VoIP. And that's how Cast is, actually. So I was happy to hear that.
Yeah, I just wish these services would use Safari.
Right? How hard is that to do it on any browser? I guess Chrome is is easier to develop with or something?
I guess. Yeah. But the problem is over half the podcasters are on a Mac.
Right.
And so...
And they like Safari, or they don't want to download Chrome?
Just Safari's default. So... it'd be nice if you just send somebody a link and they don't have to grab it and copy it in. And then if you're dealing with end users, it's just nice to be able, if it worked with Safari as well. feel when they don't have it working with Safari that holds them back.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of a lot of these mobile apps where most of the mobile apps are only available on iOS because developing on Android is a nightmare. So,
right.
Who knows?
Well, yeah, I mean, what cracks me up is when someone releases a new product or software service and it's only on Android. I'm like, okay, they don't understand. They don't understand things.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, funny. No. There was a guy, Fred Wilson, who's a VC out of New York. He was telling at one point in time, he was telling his anybody he was going to invest in, you have to release on Android first. And I'm like, wow, what bad advice can you give there, Mr. Wilson?
Right. So I just want to mention that I want to ask you some questions about Libsyn or the media hosting, a couple technical questions. I mean, it's not going to be a big commercial for Libsyn. I mean, everybody knows Libsyn. Everyone pretty much uses Libsyn. I use Libsyn exclusively. And I kind of started using Libsyn before I even knew there was anything else. I mean, I, like everyone else, I listened to, Cliff Ravenscraft, and he said, okay, here's what you do. Go sign up here and this and that. And that's what I did. So anyway, I want to ask some questions about the media hosting, but I wanted to ask you about your podcast production. Which part of your production took the longest to learn or to master for you? Like, what's the hardest thing about audio production?
Well, I mean, for me, it really was learning how to record Skype the right way. I mean, I went through a lot of trial and error and equipment, and it took me about 30 episodes before I finally got to the setup that I was at today. And so I think around episode 30 today on Podcast 411 was I finally got it to the point where I'm like, yes, I'm now finally happy with the audio engineer and the audio quality. So I think it was just because early on, you have to remember back in 2005, there were no easy ways to record Skype. I mean, that was the big thing. And there was no tutorials out there, no one showing you how to record Skype. So we were all learning in early 2005 how to do this on our own. And so it just took some time. So I think that was the hardest part. Since then, I've just been using GarageBand. I've tried every piece of software out there just to learn them. I know how to use Audacity and Adobe Audition. I've used Soundforge, yes.
Reaper.
And yeah, I've tried a bunch of different ones out there, but ultimately I like GarageBand. That's where I come back to. And really, since most podcasters are on a Mac, that's the one I stick with. But Audacity is the other one I know second best. And then I have tutorials about how to use Audacity as well.
So let's talk post-production. Do you do any post-production on any of your shows?
Well, yeah, I mean, I edit. Yeah, I'm a heavy editor.
Okay.
So like when I do an interview with somebody, I edit the heck out of it. I take out ums, uhs, you knows. When I interview someone, they're going to sound better than they've ever sounded in any interview they've ever done. And I do that for a very nefarious reason. If I make someone sound good, they're going to recommend the interview they were on with me,
right,
to their peeps.
Yeah.
You record someone and they spend the whole time going, you know. At the end, they go back and listen to how they sounded and they think they sound like an idiot. They're not going to tweet that they were on your show.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest mistake I hear from people out there is they hit record, they hit stop, and they post it. They don't do any editing. And they're like, I don't believe in editing. I've heard certain very big name people say, I don't believe in editing. You record and done. That's it. You fix it all up ahead of time. No editing. I'm like, editing's your friend. This is time shifted media. Editing is your friend. Edit out pregnant pauses, long issues. Edit out the person sneezing, the person coughing, burping, someone coming to the door, the phone ringing. Get all that crap out of there. I mean, the best example I give of what not to do was someone early on wanted to be interviewed on Podcast 411. They sent me a link to their episode. I started listening. A few minutes in, you hear, and the person goes, hold on, someone's at the door. He gets up, he walks to the door. For 5 minutes, he's talking to the person at the door. Wow. Then he comes back. He goes, okay, I'm back, and continues right on like nothing ever happened.
Oh, that's classic. Oh, my God. That's almost as good as me forgetting to hit record and then whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's an edit point. What does it take to edit that out? I mean, no one wants to hear wah, 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 for 5 minutes in the background.
Oh, man. All right, so you do a lot of editing. And you know one thing I've been thinking about lately, and tell me if you think this is crazy, Rob. I agree with you. Tightening it up. That's what I call it. Tighten up the episode.
Right.
However, I've been starting to think that some of these, and not the pregnant pauses, and not the ums, obviously, but some little quirks and some little weirdnesses might actually draw the listener in. Because if things are too perfect, it can sort of lull people to sleep. I mean, in theory. So some things that are a little quirky or a little weird or a little wacky, you might want to leave in. But that doesn't include ums and
I on Today on iOS, I literally script in ums where they are appropriate. So I'll be like, no.
Really?
Yes. So I will script in my ums because I'm like, oh, that's a place where that's a good place for an So yes, I will do that.
I've never heard that. That's awesome. All right. So
here's one advice though for anybody that is going to script.
Yeah.
Grammatically correct is not how people talk. You have to learn to write, to script in spoken word.
Right.
People, if you script grammatically correct and you try to read it, grammatically correct English is awkward to speak. That's like when you have to get up in front of your English class in high school and read that English text. It was grammatically correct and you read it like you were a robot and you were stumbling because grammatically correct English does not flow.
So true. And even if you take something that's grammatically correct and you sort of, because I learned this years ago, you can read it, like you can pause or kind of start again like that. Mm-hmm. Like you can add little things to make it more natural, but I 100% agree with what you say. Barry, do you agree with what Rob just said?
190%.
Okay, 100. You see, I agreed 100%. He agreed 190%.
Yeah,
that's a great one.
The other thing is you get listener feedback and you're going to read emails from your listeners. It's okay to correct their grammar. Oh. You don't have to read. It's okay to correct, if they say the word, they meant one word, they meant something else. It's okay. You don't have to read it verbatim. I've heard people do that. They read something, someone sent me this in, and they'll read it with the mistake in there.
Right. And then try to explain the mistake or something.
And it's like, it's the person didn't mean that. There was a typo. It's okay to get the right word in there. If they say, irregardless, you can just type regardless. You don't have to say irregardless. Irregardless isn't a word. You can say regardless. You don't want Mignon Fogarty coming down on you with the grammar hammer.
Hey, all right. Dang it. Wow, we just had a dropout on Cast, and I thought it was a dropout, and then Rob, you couldn't hear me. And right. By the way, we were just disconnected for about 15 minutes. We're trying to figure out how to reconnect and everything. And I thought it was Cast that dropped or the internet that dropped. What I think happened in the end is I think somehow my external audio interface, the computer just didn't recognize it for a second. And then, so it almost like my external audio interface got disconnected, and then you couldn't hear me, Rob. And right. then what I tried to do was refresh the screen, but it was recording in Cast, and it said, hey, if you refresh the screen, you might lose something. So I did a stupid thing. I actually hit stop on the record, and I refreshed the screen, and then it reset the URL for the whole recording session. Right. And then you were somewhere. You were in the old recording session. I was in a new recording session, and we were going back and forth trying to figure out how to reconnect.
So the lesson learned here is you make sure you have the phone number of the person you're talking with so you can text them to say, hey, what's going on? Right. So that's how we were communicating via text. And then on my side, when I tried to get back into the URL, it wouldn't let me back in the URL, and it kept throwing me to the old room. So ultimately, I had to clear the cache on Chrome to finally allow me back in. So rule of thumb here is if you do use Cast and you have crash like this, make sure you let the other person know and yourself to clear your cache in your Chrome browser for Cast.
Right.
Or you could just use Skype.
Or you could use Skype. And the other thing is, I figured out I shouldn't have touched the session or the room. I should have just unplugged my audio interface and plugged it back in and let the computer re-recognize it. Because when I got into the new room, it still wasn't hearing my voice. And so that's what I did. I took out the USB and just put it right back in, and the computer went doot doot, and it recognized it, and then it was fine. So I think if you're using Cast, I think the lesson here, if you're using Cast, don't stop recording and don't refresh the room ever.
And, sometimes where things like this will happen is, let's say you have like the Yeti mic and you plug your headphones into the Yeti mic. And you've got the Yeti mic plugged into your USB, and this could be any USB mic that has headphones that you can plug in.
Right.
And you slide your chair across your carpet protector. You can get a static shock go through your headphone cord into your mic, and that can cause your mic to drop out. And then you have to unconnect your mic and reconnect your mic. So just to know, like, especially in the wintertime, people will get these static shocks that come across the headphone wires,
right?
That will zap out their mic or their interface.
Right, totally. So I want to ask you, Rob, because you are the VP of podcaster relations at Libsyn, and you talk to a lot of people who have shows, and a lot of the biggest podcasting shows in the world, most popular shows, are host with Libsyn. So what about the audio quality of the most popular shows? Are they really high quality, or is it, kind of like a guy in his basement winging it? Like, what's the audio quality level of the top shows?
I mean, it's $150 mic audio quality for the most of the big shows, and nobody's going out and spending a ton of money on equipment. You don't have to. It has to be good. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think people all too often think they have to be perfect. They come from a radio engineering audio background, and they go out and they spend $1,500 on a mic and an arm, and you don't need that at all. So the big guys, it's not hurt your ears. You're going to bleed listening to the show in any shape or form.
Right.
But they're not, a lot of these guys, they're not out there spending, I think the most wasteful money is, I hear people going, you have to go out and get the high LPR 40. Really? Because the Audio-Technica ATR 2100, which costs $60, sounds just as good in blind taste tests.
Right.
People have taken recordings of both mics and said, hey, you choose the ATR 2100 for $60, beat the Heil PR40. Sorry, Bob Heil. I know it's a good mic, and don't get me wrong, but for the money that you spend for that, you can get a Yeti, you can get two ATR 2100s, and you've got all the mics you'll ever need.
Yeah, and you're underscoring a point I've made several times on the show. In fact, that it's you need at least decent equipment. You don't have to have the best, but you have to know how to use it. If you have a decent microphone and a decent mixer and a decent setup, if you set the levels right, if you record it at the right level, if you speak into the microphone properly and all this stuff, you can sound really good. It's not a matter of investment dollars that's going to make you sound good. It's a matter of knowing how to use the equipment, and so much comes from experience. I'm happy to know that from your journey, from where you started, not knowing much, and you learned a little here, a little there, and now you have a setup. You know how it works, and through experience, you know so much about how to produce and engineer podcast shows, and you just get it done. You're not out there. I don't even think there's an award for the best sounding podcast.
You'll never see a review on iTunes that goes, "This podcast has the best sounding audio."
Right? Oh, that's so funny.
You're never going to see that. You're never going to see that review.
Right.
But on the other hand, you will see reviews that say this sounds like crap. So you do. Like I say, you don't want it to be bleeding, but people will actually put up with bad audio or not as good audio for an audio podcast than they will for video. If you do video, you need your audio to be pristine. People are more critical of audio quality for video than they are for an audio podcast.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah, because you're used to watching television with perfect audio, but you can talk on the phone to people, and it's not. So you're actually, when you deal with an audio medium, people are a little bit more forgiving.
Right.
There's quite a few podcasts out there that do quite well, and they're phone interviews.
Right.
It's people talking, they're interviewing people on the phone. And audio quality via phone line, for at least people that are into audio engineering, you're limited to a 4 kilohertz bandwidth. It's never going to be great. The trick I always tell people is if you're going to interview somebody, say like via Skype out to interview someone, and you're on your side, you're recording, you actually make sure you record stereo, put them on one track, you on the other, and then in post-production, make your audio sound worse. put a bandwidth limit on your audio, bring your audio down so you sound similar to the person you're interviewing, so that you're not full baritone, that Barry voice.
Yes.
And the other person sounds like they're in a tin can, because that can be very jarring going back and forth between Barry and the tin can.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Totally. That's a great little tip there, too. So, Rob, this has been great. We're going to have you back on the show to talk about all the media hosting stuff. But I really wanted to get into your setup and your production. I mean, you consult with so many individuals and companies who are doing podcasts and starting podcasts, including the Forbes Podcast Network. Again, go check it out. And, you and I on the phone with some of the Forbes people, a lot of the questions were about, hey, audio setup and microphone and, the final MP3 quality, stuff like that. So, yeah.
One of the ones I didn't even mention that I do production work on the side. I do the WelchCast for Jack Welch. So Jack and Susie Welch and John Steinberg, it's the three of them. And how we actually do the recording for most of those, they set a Yeti mic on a table in the middle of the room, and I connect with them via Skype, and I record on my side. So all three of them talking, just sitting in the room talking. We set the Yeti mic on the circular pattern.
Yep, Omni.
And then I run it through Levelator. Because Susie always tends to lean forward and sound louder, and Jack tends to lean back,
right,
and sound not as loud, and that brings them all to the same level. So I mean, again, it's really, if you have good content and you don't want to hurt their ears, but the Yeti mic, it's a nice, very multifunctional mic.
I like the sound of the Yeti too, but question for you, since you use the Yeti and you know a lot about it and have experience with it, the biggest concern I have with the Yeti is when it's sitting on a table or a desk and the person's like tapping the table and you hear this low rumble.
Yeah, that's the biggest issue. Matter of fact, what we actually do with them is we set the Yeti in the middle and we put it on a couple of towels.
Okay.
And even then, Jack would still tap the table, and we're like, I'd be like on my side going, stop tapping the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's an issue, and because that's the downside of it. Absolutely. And that is a thing. And I have my Yeti mounted on one table. And then where my computer is one table over, so they're not connected. So if I happen to hit my own table, it will vibrate back up through the arm that's holding my Yeti.
Right. I saw online they do make a shock mount for the Yeti, but
yeah, I know I need to get it.
But it looks huge and crazy. I don't know.
It does. I know.
I was a little afraid.
Yeah, I need to. I honestly, that's one of the things in my setup. What I look at that I really, it's my next upgrade is the arm that I have my Yeti on. I used to have one arm. I came in one day and I was like, I look in my office and I look at my mic is on the floor.
Oh no!
And the arm, I had it so long. I had one of those screw mounts on the desktop. It broke the screw mount on the top.
Oh,
so yeah, that had broken. The arm it fell over. But it didn't damage the mic, luckily.
Oh, good.
But I said to my kids, I'm like, you guys in there playing in my office? I'm like, no. I'm like, okay. And then I looked and I saw it actually had just a fatigue break.
Over time. Oh, you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
How old are your kids? Do they have podcasts?
Yes, my younger one does, actually.
Nice.
Porter's podcast. He started podcasting when he was 5.5 years old. He's now 7. I have a 9-year-old as well. But my, actually, he just turned 10. But my younger one, he came to me, and I'm not a tiger dad. He came to me and he said, I want a podcast. And I'm like, okay, Porter. Because I tried to push his brother into it, and his brother wouldn't do it. So I said, okay, Porter, fine. I hit him the question, what do you want a podcast about? And he goes, I want to do a podcast where I answer people's questions.
Nice.
I go, okay, that's actually a format that works.
Yeah.
It wasn't something crazy, it was,
right.
And so, then I hit him with like, what do you want to call it? He goes, Porter's Podcast. I'm like, all right, you got a name, you got a format. I go, that's all you need. You got a producer here. So we've been doing it on and off since he's 5.5. And I should say the on and off is me, not him, because I have to prep work. But we get people sending questions, and then we play the questions, and we and him will research and we'll find answers to it together. And then he records, and then I edit. And I edit a lot. And But yeah, that recording setup is the Yeti and into GarageBand, and him sitting on my lap, and we just go, and then I'll say, say this or that, and he'll say, and a question, I'll say, okay, answer that question, and he'll just start rambling, and those are the best ones when he just rambles.
Oh yeah,
because he's funny.
That's cool.
He's got a good little sense of humor. He'll throw me under the bus every now and then.
Oh!
Yeah, like one episode, we came back, we hadn't done it for a while, and he goes, sorry, I haven't been doing podcasts lately. It's my producer's fault.
Oh, classic.
Yeah, so he's got a good comedic timing on him.
That's cool.
Porter's podcast, and you can find that one in iTunes. And about 10-minute episodes, he's been heard in over 100 countries around the world.
That's
and
cool.
Every episode we start out with him saying thank you in a different language to say thank you to one of the countries that he's been heard in their native language.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah, we'll check that out. I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. Do you have a pop filter on your Yeti, by the way?
Double pop filter. I have the one that goes on it, and then I got another one in front of it. So I've got one that goes over the front of the mic, and then I got another one in front, so that keeps me a distance away from it. But yes, I do.
Okay.
Is it sounding like I don't have my pop filter?
No, it sounds really good. It sounds like you're not popping, and you sound close to the mic. See, a lot of the hosts that I produce that have Yetis, they don't have pop filters, and if they get too close, it's really nasty.
I double pop filter. I have the one that goes over the top of the mic itself, and then I have a regular one that with the arm, with the round circular one. So that gives me a double pop. That keeps me from getting too close to the mic.
Right.
So when my nose starts hitting the pop filter, I know I'm a little close. And then also I always make sure before I record, I got a gap between my arm, between the pop filter on the arm and the mic, so they're not rubbing.
Right.
So I always put my hand through it. So if I can put my hand between it, I've got the right distance between it. So.
Oh, that is good. Yeah, getting close really helps. I was just going to ask you too about if you're in a room that's a little bit soundproofed or deadened at all.
To my wife's chagrin, yes, there is foam up on the wall that she doesn't like. To my, I will humbly say it is mattress foam that probably is flammable and shouldn't be up on the wall.
Oh, that's classic.
But it's just in the corner, and it's only in the corner where I'm at. Because when I first moved in to this office, there was the standing wave reverb, and so I had to put it up on the walls. So my wife is like, I'm like, Karen, you got the whole house. This is my office.
Yeah.
Everything else is yours. I get it all to say in here.
Right. Hey, Barry, you were there when Rob's wife walked in the first time and looked at the studio. What did she say?
It's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess. So I don't know.
Oh, it is. It is a mess.
Oh, wait. Here's what she really said. Barry, what did she really say?
That's frightening.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people think that's Barry White. It is not Barry White. Barry, is your last name White?
No way.
Oh, wait. Where's the no way? You crazy? Hold on. Here we go.
No way. You crazy?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, Rob, this has been just tremendous spending time with you and learning from you. And I hope you can come back and we can talk about media hosting in a little more depth and on a more technical basis. But I'm going to have links to all your podcasts, Podcast 411, The Feed, Today in iOS, KC Startup 411, the WelchCast, and Porter's podcast. I'm going to have links to all those in the show notes. Thank you so much, Rob, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So this has been great. Thank you guys for listening so much. Again, podcastengineeringschool.com. You can see all our episodes. You can listen in iTunes and Stitcher and TuneIn Radio and all that stuff. This has been great. Again, this show is, if you listen every week, a lot of this knowledge is just going to drip on you and seep into your brain and into your soul. So we're happy you're here, and I hope you gained some knowledge from this as well. I know you did. So until next week, take care, everybody, and sound great.
Tell me 'cause they beat it in the